Okay, this is game review 1. We'll discuss this game quickly. The ideas that we're looking for in this game are control of the center, developing pieces towards the center, identifying a breakthrough square, placing bishops on long diagonals, supporting strong squares, breaking pins if possible, forcing your opponent's pieces out of the center, developing a long-term strategy, exchange weak pieces for strong pieces, maintaining a good pawn structure, keeping bishops in open positions, keep your king safe, castle early, make sound tactical threats, watch for tactical threats, consider protecting with lowest value, attack and expose queen, place rooks on open files, ahead of material, exchange pieces but not pawns, make sound mating threats. So those are the concepts that we're looking for, and the better you are able to identify those concepts in a game analysis situation, the better you'll be able to apply those concepts to your own games. Okay, here we go. Pawn to d4, opening with the central pawn. Knight to f6, attacking central squares, most importantly denying pawn to e4. c5, again taking control of the center. Wherever you get your pawns side by side like that, that is usually a strong position in the center. Pawn e6, allowing your pieces to develop. Knight c6, again white wants to get in pawn to e4, so he's protecting that square with his knight. Black wants to deny pawn to e4, so he pins the knight to the king. If pawn to e4, knight takes, and knight cannot recapture because that's an absolute pin. Knight to f3, developing pieces towards the center. b6, preparing to place the bishop on the long diagonal because the bishop was going to find it very difficult to come out this way. Bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the king. Again, attempting to make it possible to play pawn to e4. Pawn to bishop 7. The bishop denies pawn to e4. Again, in this opening, pawn to e4 is a key square, and you see how white is trying to get in pawn to king 4 or pawn to e4, and black is attempting to deny it. a4. Always in the opening, you're looking for pieces that don't do anything involving the center, and that often is a loss of a tempo, and I do not believe that pawn a4 does anything directly involving the ideas behind this particular opening. Now black responded pawn to e5. What that does is that supports the b4 that's now a strong square for black, because that square cannot be opposed by a pawn. So if black gets a piece there, it will probably stay there for quite a while, just as this bishop has the opportunity to stay there because it cannot be forced away by a pawn. Knight e5, white's placing a piece in the center, which is usually a good idea unless you have not completely finished your development, which white has not done. He's not gotten his bishop out, he is not castled, he's not connected his rooks, yet he's attempting to maintain a central space in the center. This is interesting. Black decides to break the pin of his knight, again denying white e4, and that supporting square can now be occupied by a different piece, possibly the knight. And now we see white's plan is to use the f3 pawn to support his e4 push, but that also weakens the diagonal from h4 to e1. White is thinking that there's no possibility for black to take advantage of that at this point. The problem is it's a permanent weakness. This diagonal will always be there, especially if g4 is pushed. Right now it can be blocked off, but you got to lose a tempo to block off that diagonal that you didn't have to weaken in the first place. Pawn to d6, and this is a problem with sticking your knight or any piece in the center too early, is that a pawn can very easily run it away. Bishop takes knight. Now, whenever you're giving up your bishop for a knight, you want to make sure that you can close the position. I am not sure that white can close this position. Now, it's a slight advantage to have the bishop pair because most chess positions end up being open, especially if you make it all the way down to the end game. So right now, black has the bishop pair. Now we see white's idea. He can push in e4, and his idea is to get rid of the bishop, so black will no longer have the bishop pair. Black wants to keep his bishop pair, so he backs it away. Knight e4, which may be again a dubious move. He's moved the knight 1, 2, 3, now 4 times when his bishop and his bishop has not been developed, and his king is not safe. So that's very iffy. And on e3, the pawn looks very weak. There's nothing, I'm sorry, the knight looks very weak. There's nothing protecting that knight. Black decides to develop his final minor piece. It may have been a better idea to head towards his strong square, but he goes for d7. Now, very often beginners want to attack, so they try to pawn storm the king. Number one, the king has not been castled, and number two, now the diagonal from h4 to e1 is very weak and exposed. Now black is doing pretty much the same thing, but not quite as bad. He's attempting to break open the position with h5. If the exchange happens, then the diagonal is open and his bishops will start to go work. If white attempts to push forward, pawn takes, knight comes over. White would have been much better just to push forward. It looks like he can lock up the position. g2. He puts on the long diagonal, but you see the difference. Black's long diagonal is open. White's long diagonal is blocked by his own pawn. Bishop h4, the check. Now black permanently denies white the opportunity to castle. It looks like black is attempting to move in and take control of some key dark squares, especially since white does not have a dark squared bishop and he's attacking the knight. The queen defends the knight, which is usually when you know that you're in a bad situation, when you have to defend a lower valued piece with a higher valued piece. Now black is attempting to open a position, but I don't think he really can. He should have probably exchanged, but if white pushes forward, looks like white will achieve a closed position and at the very least cut off that bishop. Before black tries to open a position, or before you ever open any positions, or nearly ever, as a beginner ever, you should get your king into safety, but he doesn't. He goes to break it open right away. Knight takes e5. I think the choice between the pawn and knight was obvious. The knight comes with captures with the tempo, because now he's attacking the white queen. If the queen should capture the pawn, then queen captures knight, and black will be threatening mate on the next move. And the white queen is very exposed at d6. d2, he has to stay in contact with the white knight that's being attacked, and now he stuffs the knight into a pin. Castle. We're up to the 17th move, and black has finally gotten his king into safety, and white doesn't have that option. King 1 is g1 is a very doubtful move. It appears to just waste a tempo. It doesn't do anything as far as getting the king into a safer position. Again, you want to get all your pieces, or as many pieces as possible, involved before you make your final breakthrough for an attack. He brings in the other rook. The breaking move might be f5. White decides to attack the black queen. Problem here is bishop takes the queen off. Now black no longer has a bishop pair, but white also does not have the bishop pair. In order to maintain material equality, white has to recapture. And now his pawn structure is very weak. He has double isolated pawns on an open file. That means a very weak position if it should come to the end game. And to add additional hurt to that, he loses a pawn. As we know, the pawn can be turned into a queen late in the game, and now he has a knight attacking and a queen attacking the one piece and only the queen defending. White has to find another defender. He does so with rook to a3. Problem is, black can bring in a third attacker with check. So black can bring in a third attacker with check, and white has no possibilities of defending. Black goes a pawn and a piece ahead. White tries to get back some material, which is probably not a good idea. His pieces are not really working together. He's on the defense, and now he just opened up another file to come into his king, to come towards his king, and black immediately takes advantage of it. Rooks belong on open files. If you can take control of a file, then by all means do so, or at least seriously consider it. Queen has to be saved. She moves to c7, and of course that causes the game to end very quickly. Rook is checking, bishop blocks that square, the knight blocks that square. The bishop and the knight are guarding that square. Bishop covers that square, the rook checks, and checkmate. If we look at the summary, white lost his right to castle on the 13th move. His pawn structure was compromised on the 19th move. The pinned knight at e3 had 3 black attackers, only 1 white defender. And because black's pieces were so well coordinated, the end came quickly. Okay, we'll move on to game 2. Remember, study these games independently. When you can replay the game from memory, that's another sign that you actually understand the theory behind each of the moves, whether it was a strong move or a weak move.